Turned over to the very capable leadership of Marianne Slack. I don't know if Marianne is here, but she's the one who's going to make sure that it's a success, and I know that she will. So I'm very excited, very happy to have her back and returning to my office over the past year or so, because that's what's going to make this a great success in the long haul. PDUFA was one of the vehicles that we decided to use to ensure long-term success of our data standards efforts. The PDUFA negotiations and preparing for those negotiations was underway about two or 3 years ago, and we realized that one of the problems that we had was that we couldn't require standardized data submissions. We couldn't require electronic submissions at that time. And so it was very difficult to really get that sort of extra push to 100%, which we really needed, so we wouldn't have to have two systems going in parallel, one devoted to paper, the other devoted to electronic submissions, and a whole wide range of variation in between. So I'm not going to tell you all, I could spend all morning telling you all about PDUFA, but I'll spare you that because I'm just going to focus on the data standards piece of it. But generally, if you're not familiar with this program, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act was initially implemented in 1993. It was the authorizing legislation was in 1992, and it's been really critical to CDER and I think CBER's success in terms of human drug review ever since then. Back before we had the Prescription Drug User Fee Act funding, we really were getting behind in terms of our submissions and reviewing them to enable patients to have access to new drugs. Patients were concerned about this. Industry was very concerned about the delays. And so this gave us the ability to charge user fees, and those funds were added to our appropriated dollars, taxpayer dollars. And going along with that extra money, CDER and CBER particularly, and FDA in general, made a commitment to a variety of performance goals that really increased the predictability and the timeliness of our review. And it's been, over the past almost 20 years now, a very big success. The clinical development times dropped about 10%. That may have some things to do with the FDA process, but it's also a reflection of industry's improved efficiency. And the average time for marketing application reviews dropped by 60%. So it used to take about 2 years on average for a drug to be approved, and now it's more on the order of 10 months for a standard application and 6 months for priority. So it's been a success for patients as well. At this point, PDUFA provides over $500 million. It's going to be over $600 million with the new authorization coming this year, we hope, of fee funding, and that's more than half of our funding for the Human Drug Review Program. The current authority expires this coming September. We've already transmitted our recommendations to Congress this past January, and so they are now, it's now in the legislative phase, and we are supporting that process with technical assistance. We had an extensive negotiation with industry, went from July of 2010 to May of last year. We engaged public stakeholders as well in parallel with that industry negotiation. And one of the things, this is the full set of recommendations on this slide, and I'll just walk through them. But one of the things, as I said earlier, that we identified, FDA identified as a strategic need that we raised early on in these discussions with industry was the need for standardized data. And the whole program, this will really help us in doing everything that we have in PDUFA 5. And let me just run through these items. We have a new review program for new molecular entity NDAs and original BLAs to try to increase our communication with sponsors throughout the review process, through the whole review period, to maybe better address any issues that come up and possibly lead to more first cycle approvals where first cycle approval is possible with the additional information. There are a variety of enhancements to the program to try to strengthen the science and improve methodologies. So increasing our methods for meta-analysis and best practices with meta-analysis, increasing our capacity to review and qualify biomarkers for drug development and drug approval, using patient-reported outcomes and qualifying new patient-reported outcome tools so that those can be used in development and review. and developing drugs for rare diseases, increasing our capacity for development of drugs for rare diseases. And then this promoting innovation by enhancing our ability to communicate with companies early on in development. About half of the applications that are now in development are being sponsored by companies that have no approved product. They are new emerging companies, and they in particular have let us know that they want more help and they have a lot of questions that they need to have answered during development. They don't have a big regulatory affairs department, so they do need some extra help, and that's what that's about. We have a benefit risk assessment effort underway. We're going to enhance that under PDUFA 5. And we have some post-market safety initiatives as well, trying to standardize the risk evaluation and mitigation strategies so that those are better integrated into the healthcare system and they become very effective without being burdensome to the healthcare system. And using this Sentinel capability, which is the name we've given to our active surveillance capability that we're developing in collaboration with many public and private partners, trying to use that to examine particular post-market safety issues. And finally, the thing I want to talk about today, requiring electronic submissions and standardization of the data. And I'll pass on those other two that are sort of technical. Well, what's the problem we're trying to address here? This is the problem as we portrayed it to industry because it's really what we thought that they would see and get why this was really critical to us. They're very concerned that we be more predictable and timely in our review of their applications. But the quality and the variability of the applications coming in the door is such that we can't make up for that in our process. And so the extreme variability in terms of sometimes standards are used, but not a standard. I remember Chuck had some terrific slides that I used extensively in our negotiations with industry to show just how variable something that was supposedly following, say, a CDISC standard, but in fact it was the sponsor's slight variation on the CDISC standard, and all you need is a slight variation to make it just as hard as if there was no standard at all. So we had many different flavors of standardized applications and then many non-standardized applications coming in, and everyone would take a Herculean effort on the part of the reviewers if they wanted to do any more in-depth analysis. And so this, of course, limited the ability to answer those in-depth questions. Industry wanted us to tell them earlier whether or not there was going to be a REMS. Well, if you can't really do the analyses that you have to do earlier, you're not going to be able to tell them earlier. And so they got that this was a real great limiting step for us and for them as well. And so one of the first initiatives that they agreed to was this one on data standardization. Now, it's not enough to just have the extra funds. The way PDUFA typically works is we'll have some extra resourcing and we'll make a commitment, and I'll show you in a minute what's in the commitments here. But the extra piece that we needed to get sort of a joint sort of agreement on was that the statute would be changed to have language that says that the Secretary can require that standardized submissions can require them using guidance. Normally, guidance doesn't have the force of, is not enforceable, but the statute explicitly uses language to say that in this case, guidance will be enforceable. It'll have the force of regulation. And we have a very clear process laid out, though, to make this very predictable for companies so that we can have a standards process that actually moves forward in a very regular, iterative fashion, the way you'd want it to keep updating standards, with lots of opportunity for public participation in that process. And so we're going to be able to both develop, the first thing will be standardizing, and I'm sorry about the small size here, but what the commitment, this is the commitment letter language, what the commitment we've made will do is begin with a draft guidance as soon as December of this coming year. And when that guidance goes final, companies have 24 months following the final guidance publication to be compliant with that standard. And so the first thing that we require, and it's laid out in the commitment letter, there's these two paragraphs 1 and 2 here, 24 months after the publication of the guidance, and so in other words, 24 months after, December of 2014, we would be requiring electronic common technical document submissions. So the first thing we're requiring to be standardized, which we have on the schedule here, is the electronic common technical document submission. So we'll start very basic. A lot of this is coming in ECTD format already, and so we're just saying now we're going to go to 100% in terms of the sort of structured format. And then beyond that, we have a clinical terminology commitment that we've made. It's rather ambitious. We're going to try to have all 17 of our review divisions and all of the top sort of disease areas, indication areas, be standardized, at least some of the key terminology, by the end of PDUFA 5, so over a 5-year period. CPATH and CDISC are collaborating, I think, on an effort to do what CPATH is calling 55 and 5, which is quite ambitious, but that was 55 indications in 5 years. But we're going to not standardize probably every term that there is, but we'll try to take the top layer of terms. And what we basically have set up here is a systematic process for trying to work collaboratively with SDOs to develop standards. We'll then, when those standards have gone through the SDO process, we'll be able to update our draft guidance. It allows for comment on the guidance, and we can take those comments and reflect them in the final guidance. The final guidance then has another 2 years before those standards will be required. And that's the flow of this. So we think that this will set us up to begin a very systematic process for updating guidance, and it gives us some funds as well as the authority. We think these enhancements will not just affect the efficiency of the drug review process, but will really set the stage for us to use standardized data in many, many more ways, in many ways that our Computational Science Center will be able to exploit. And so thank